Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing books of 2022. Now, for this video, it's going to be a mix of books that were highly anticipated and maybe didn't get a high enough rating, the high rating that I thought I would give them. So it's not necessarily a book that I wouldn't recommend to people, but it's just my expectations and what I ended up by getting and what I felt while reading them, they didn't match up. So it's not necessarily my most hated books of the year. But there are some books that are 1-star, 2-star DNFs that I do have on this list. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, and I'm just going to talk about why these books disappointed me. First up on the list is The Naked Fisherman by Julie Ann. At the beginning of this year, I had asked people to send me a couple books, and I do this every once in a while. Send me a couple books that I said that I would never, ever read. What do you want me to read that I said that I wouldn't read? Because sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I am wrong. Sometimes on paper I'm like, I don't want it. Or I've heard that a book has a lot of angst, and I will avoid angst if I can. Because 9 times out of 10, I will be more frustrated with a very angsty book. But sometimes the angst just works, and sometimes I'm wrong. So for The Naked Fisherman, it's the first book in a duet. The second book is called The Lost Fisherman. It's an age gap romance, and the first book did not work for me. And I was just like, I did not want to read the second book in the series. I couldn't really find in this first book the chemistry and connection. It was lots of forbiddenness, the age gap factor, the forced proximity with the heroine living in, the extra room, the basement of the hero, the secretiveness of the relationship as well. And I pretty much did not like the hero. I hated the hero in the first book. He came off as really kind of creepy to me, taking advantage of a girl, and really, and this is just my interpretation of his character. I know that a lot of people really love this series, but for me, I just did not see why he was attracted to her. The only things that I could come up with was it was a thrill of the chase and kind of like a conquest thing. Like, can I get this shy virgin? Can I get her to do dirty, naughty things with me? And I was just so icked out by the first one so much. But I made a commitment and I said that I was going to read book 2. So I gave The Naked Fisherman 2 stars. I was just like, no, did not work for me, and kind of hates it. Then I read book 2, The Lost Fisherman. There was a time jump, which I think was very necessary, and also an amnesia factor to go along with that. And I ended up by liking it a lot better. So all is not lost. I think I gave The Lost Fisherman 4 stars, which is wild to me. First book 2 stars, second book 4 stars. How does that happen? I don't know. But yeah, The Naked Fisherman, did not work. And I think that Julie Ann is just one of those authors where she probably won't work for me more times than she will. So I'd be hesitant to pick up another Julie Ann book, even though lots of people really like her. I just think it's better to stay away from beloved books if you know you're not going to like them, because why rain on somebody else's parade? Like, let them hype it up and find their audience that's going to really love the books. You don't need me to say that I don't like an author. Next up, The Savage by Sophie Lark. It makes me so sad to put this book on this list, but the disappointment was so real for this book. I couldn't get over how much I disliked it. So I love the Kingmaker Chronicles. I love this series. It's Hogwarts for Mafia. It's a second generation romance, a spinoff from her Brutal Birthright series. And at the very end of it, there's only 4 books and the series was concluded, but at the very end of it, we kind of got a tease for this couple. Like, maybe these 2 characters, these cousins, these side characters, maybe they were going to have a thing in the future. And of course we get lots of epilogues, and we do find out they do get together. But lots of people wanted to see that romance, and so Sophie Lark decided to write it. And it was not planned, and she wrote it anyway. The Savage was not what I expected. For me, it had a very different vibe from the Kingmaker Chronicles and also the Brutal Birthright. It had it was less a mafia romance than it was 2 very privileged young adults, and they want to basically carve out their own territory and find their own niche. And it had lots of like unhinged Bonnie and Clyde vibes. Their cash grab was making these party drugs, and they also partook in the drugs that they were making as well. And I really hated that part of the story. That's not something that I want to read about. Instead of making me think that the characters are like cool and edgy, like, it made me feel like they were just dumb kids. And I thought that their relationship was so messy and I just didn't enjoy it. I had a very hard time connecting with either of them, and it made me really sad to give this book 2 stars, but I really, really dislike this book so much. The next one is A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and this is a case of I gave this book 4 stars. And I heard so much about this book. I heard lots of people really loving this book and series by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and I had seen like Waking Olivia the year before that. So I had seen her name before, but I never was compelled to pick it up until a couple friends really loved this one. So I thought, why not give it a try? I had a difficult time getting into it in the beginning because I felt like the heroine was kind of making up reasons why she hated the hero. Like it was just kind of like she was overly hateful toward the hero in the beginning, but since it was forced proximity, she's taking the place of her best friend who was the assistant to this very famous Hollywood plastic surgeon. Of course, he's kind of had a thing for her, but they butt heads a lot. And I actually really started to enjoy their romance despite having like a little rocky beginning for me personally. And it was going so well. I was like, damn, okay, this is a book that I can really get behind. I'm excited to try more Elizabeth O'Rourke's. And the third act conflict really brought it down for me. Like it was going to be a 5-star, and I thought that the third act breakup was completely unnecessary. Anytime I feel like an author is forcing the situation where it doesn't feel like it's a natural reason for somebody to break up, like they're kind of going above and beyond to create a conflict, it always, always, always brings a book down for me. And all that's subjective things. I know that this book was phenomenal from beginning to end for a lot of people, but again, everything about rating books and what your reading preference is completely subjective. So yeah, it was just a little bit of a disappointment because it was going so well, and then at the end it tanked for me. But again, still gave it 4 stars. It was fine. This next one hurts a little bit too. Falls Boys by Penelope Douglas. It's a Next Generation spinoff from her Fall Away series. The first book is Bully, and I read that whole entire series years ago. I really enjoyed it. Not my like favorite books by Penelope Douglas, but I was really excited to see this Next Generation because there was teasers in like one of the novellas that Penelope Douglas had written. And guys, I just struggled to get into this book at all, and I ended up by DNFing it. I can't lie that I was kind of wary about picking this book up because the last couple books that Penelope Douglas has written haven't worked for me. That's really sad because they have written one of my favorite books of all time, which is Birthday Girl. Phenomenal, taboo, forbidden age gap romance. It's just amazing. And of course I enjoyed previous books as well, but I have not enjoyed at least the last 2 that they have put out. So I was a little bit wary. I picked it up. I pushed through more than I normally would have, but eventually I did have to DNF because I could not connect with these characters. And I think that what's missing for me in the last couple of books that they've written is in the past, in the books that I have liked, that have focused on enemies to lovers relationships or taboo forbidden relationships that they have written, there has been a real balance between that edginess, that edgy, gritty tabooness that they are known for, and also the emotional stakes, like me being invested in them as characters. That has been there in the past in books that I have loved. And the most recent ones have been like edgy without substance. And I think that that's what I'm kind of missing. And a lot of the misses for this year have had that problem where I almost feel like some books are being written for like the titillating factor, like the, ooh, it's so taboo type of thing. Of course, we're attracted to that. I am attracted to that. I love taboo romance. And you can get me with these posts listing this list of tropes that are full of buzzwords for the book community, and they'll like swarm like hornets to those buzzwords. But I feel like a lot of books that are being written recently are so influenced by those buzzwords that I'm missing like the heart of it. So anyway, I got a little bit too deep into that. Yeah, I DNF Falls Boys. It was disappointing because I was kind of anticipating it. I started to reread the Fall Away series in anticipation for this, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't waste the time on it. The next one, The Confidence of Wildflowers by Michaela Smeltzer. This book made me mad. This book did make me mad. And again, I don't want to come off as ranty. I know that lots of people really love this book. Like, it blew them away. But for me, this is one of those instances where the angst factor absolutely did not work for me. This book probably would have been more of a 3-star book for me were it not for the ending. There was something that happened in the ending, and I talked about it in past videos, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the books that I actually wrote a review for, which I don't always make time just because my time has been pretty limited this year to actually write physical reviews on Goodreads, but I'm pretty sure I did write a review for this one because I wanted people to know the spoiler at the end just in case, because I felt a little bit blindsided by it, and it felt so unnecessary to me. I just don't like those types of things in books. I just don't. It's definitely a personal preference, but that's what made this book, which was going to be a 3-star, because I was enjoying the tabooness, the forbiddenness. They have an age gap. It's a single dad romance, also a neighbor romance as well. They have like the secret relationship. I really enjoyed a lot about the book, but it also felt like it was dragging on a little bit. Like I felt like the author was dragging the secretiveness of that relationship on, like it didn't need to be. The characters were creating reasons why this relationship had to be secret. There really was no real reason. So that's why it was going to be a 3-star. And then the ending happened and then I was like 1 star. Just cannot get behind this book at all. And I did not want to dive into the second book at all. I didn't think it was worth my time. So I read spoilers, and I'm glad that I didn't read it, because I think, again, if the first book felt like it was dragging on for no reason, then I knew that I would never be satisfied with the second book, even if it had not been a 1-star, because this book was just way too long. The story, this couple did not need this much page time to tell their story. They just did not. So yeah, that was probably the one that had me up in my feels like the most about, besides this next book, Pen Pal by J.T. Geisinger. I ranted about this book. I ranted about this book because of the way that it was originally marketed. I will not shut up about this. Like, I just won't. I don't think that it was a right thing for this author to do. And this author, who I've loved in the past, like I love the Queens and Monsters series so much. And I really did kind of feel betrayed by the marketing tactics for this book, Pen Pal. Originally, this was pitched as a dark romance between a widow who, her husband had recently died, and then she starts receiving these mysterious letters, and the letters turn out to be from a person who is in jail, an inmate. That's the book that I was expecting, because that's the book that was marketed to me when it was announced. And it was not until I think maybe a month before release when some ARC readers were rightfully calling for the book to have content warnings and also to be recategorized because it wasn't a romance. Caitlin, the love librarian, was one of the ones who was an ARC reader, and she found loads of issues that needed to be addressed before the book was released, and I'm very grateful for Caitlin. And also, Caitlin, thank you so much, because when I read this book, I had to message her, and it felt really good to have another person who was on my wavelength about how much this book did not work. It was so nice to be able to have somebody to rant privately to. Because again, some people really like this. Some people really like this non-romance book. And it wasn't just the ending, which makes this book not a romance, like full stop, not a romance. I'm not making excuses. I'm not buying into the non-traditional HEA thing that the author tried to tag onto this book. Like, no. I feel tricked. I feel betrayed. End of story with that. The book, the romance itself, was weird. It was strange. I did not get any chemistry between the characters, really. And some of the sex scenes were just cringy. They were just cringy, like straight up plain cringe. It was supposed to be sexy, it was supposed to be spicy, and all I could do was be like, ew, I do not like this at all. Like, there was this thing, like this bunny / rabbit thing that I remember that I could not help but laugh during these sex scenes. Like, laugh because I wanted to cry because I had been anticipating this book for so long. And yeah, that's why Pen Pal was 2 stars. It was kind of generous because I felt bad because this is an author that I love. I usually love, but like, honestly, if I'm being honest, this book was 1 star and I generously gave it 2 stars. Can you tell that my ratings are based on my feels? My feels come out in my ratings. Okay, yeah, moving on. 2 Wrongs Make a Right by Chloe Leese. This book I ended up by giving 3 stars, and there was so much about the book that I actually really did enjoy, but there were a couple things that made this book a 3 star for me. In previous videos, I did talk about what didn't work for me, and I'll mention that again, but I wanted to talk about what I really loved about this book. So the premise is that the heroine B, she is the more quirky twin. I believe she's a twin. She's the more quirky sister, at least. She's an artist. She has tattoos. She has, you know, quirky hair colors and all that. She's also clumsy, which is one of my least, okay, I said I was gonna talk about the stuff that I really love, but I couldn't help but mention that one of her character traits is clumsy, and I absolutely hate it when an author makes a character clumsy. Like, it's just part of her personality that she's clumsy, and I'm just like, no, we can throw that away. Anyway, she meets this guy who is friends with her sister's boyfriend, and they do not hit it off when they first meet, but they get into a situation where they end up by fake dating, and since they are trying to pretend that they are dating, it forces them to be together. Everything about the middle of the book worked for me. I enjoyed them as a couple so much. I thought that their romance was so freaking cute. Like, so freaking sweet. The hero, Jamie, who's like, their opposites attract. He's very buttoned up, nerdy, and she's quirky and vibrant, and they pair really well together. But there's a scene where Jamie does, like, it's a grand gesture scene just plopped in the middle of a book. It's just, you can tell that he likes her so much and he understands her so much. The heroine B is autistic, and he discovers that she has texture issues. She doesn't really like to eat vegetables. It's very hard for her to try. And he's very worried about her health, and so he's like, how can I make vegetables palatable to her? And she discovers, accidentally, while going through his freezer, he has so much frozen soup in his freezer, and she's like, what, are you prepping? Like, what is this? And he's just like, no, I just thought, like, since I have a very high power blender, like, I'd try different combinations of blended vegetable soup to see if maybe one of these you would like it. And he was so embarrassed that she found out about it, because he wasn't ready to reveal this I'm so into you grand gesture thing. And I swooned so hard by that. I was like, Jamie, God, I love him. So I really love them as a couple. Again, I think they paired so well together as opposites attract romance. But I think that the reason why this book really didn't work for me, it's twofold. The first thing is that this book unnecessarily has a brief enemies to lovers situation in the beginning. And I have talked about it before, but I don't think that Chloe Leese is the best at setting up an enemies to lovers situation. Each time I've read a book by her where she's had this trope, I have been just so confused as to why these characters think they're enemies. And this was also the case for Bea and Jamie. To me, Bea completely made up in her head that Jamie was her enemy, that Jamie didn't like her. So the situation was, Bea was walking down the stairs, didn't want to mingle in a party. She is introduced to Jamie, and she thinks he's beautiful and hot, and she's looking at him with an artist's gaze. Like, when it comes to art, she hasn't been inspired to draw, and she sees him and she's like, wow, I feel like I could really draw this guy. And she locks eyes with him, and she sees this surprise and this interest, and then in her head she's like, I can quickly see in his eyes, not in his words, not in his expression, like scowling at her. He doesn't do any of that. He doesn't say anything rude to her, but she can tell by his eyes that he is judging her. And I think that this situation would have worked much better if he actually would have been the first person to say something rude to back up this belief that she had that he was judging her. She was just like, he's probably judging my tattoos because he's like all pristine and clean cut and all that. And she's just like, he's judging my tattoos. So you know what? I'm going to come at him hard and I'm going to say rude things to him. And so she did that. She started the enemies relationship because it's in her head. It was in her head. I really don't think that Jamie would have been rude to her, and that would have been a thing. And it was completely unnecessary, honestly. And then the second reason why this book ended up by being a 3-star instead of a 4 or 5-star was there was a case of unnecessary third act conflict. There was a very dumb reason as to why these characters briefly broke up before they reconciled in the end. And I was just like, I was so frustrated because sometimes there does not need to be a third act conflict. Sometimes there needs to be an external conflict that has nothing to do with the couple's relationship, that it's something else that is an exciting scene and makes more sense for the story, other than let me make one of the characters come up with a completely dumb reason to break up with the significant other. And my disappointment in the reason for the breakup was amplified by the fact that, how can I say this without being like spoilery? I'm just gonna have to do a brief spoiler. So Bea breaks up with Jamie because her sister finds out that her fiance is an absolute random, oh, that was also random. The randomness of the sister's boyfriend being an absolute asshole, control freak, awful, awful guy. He went from being charming and sweet in the beginning to like pedal to the metal, I am outwardly a douchebag. And it just wasn't good writing to me. Wasn't good writing, his character development to being the villain. And B breaks up with Jamie because she's like, well, you're friends with him. Even though Jamie has said, we're kind of forced friends because our parents are friendly, but like, I already don't kind of like him. We don't really get along. We don't hang out that much. So he's already said like, he would drop him like a hot potato, okay? And B's breaking up with Jamie because he's kind of sort of acquaintance friends with this person. She's like, I need to focus on my sister and it would be too hard for me to be in a relationship with you because you were his friend. And he's just like, well, we don't have to break up for that. Like, I understand if you need to be by your sister's side right now, that she's going through this very tough, difficult time. Like, I am understanding of that. And I'm like, yeah, B, you don't have to break up. She still's like insistent, no, we just cannot be in a relationship. I have to choose my sister over you. He's understandably very upset by this, and he also has, you know, his baggage about not being chosen, always being second best and all that. So it like really punches him in the feels. And then we turn around and B's sister, without telling B at all, decides to take the other sister's place in Scotland. So one of the sisters is travel. I think she's like a travel blogger or something like that. And she ended up by getting hurt, so she has to come home. And she offers up this place that she had booked in Scotland to the sister who just got broken up with. And literally B sacrificed love, sacrificed her time, sacrificed everything to cater to this one sister. And that sister seemed to not be aware of the fact that B was making her the absolute center of B's universe, and didn't feel the need to tell B until the day that she was walking out the house. And it was just like, wow, that's the person that you broke up with the love of your life for? This ungrateful sister? Okay, so that's how I felt about that. And I don't blame the sister. I don't blame the sister. But it was just a weird thing. It was just a weird move. And then after the sister left, she's like, oh, I guess I can go get my boyfriend back that I dropped for absolutely no reason. It was strange. So yeah, 3 stars. It could have been a 5-star. Next, I have Garnet Flats by Devney Perry. I really like this series. And this was a case of second chance romance that the reason for the breakup was absolutely disappointing. I struggle with second chance romances mostly because, again, 9 times out of 10, the reason for the original breakup, if they actually were in a full-on relationship before and then they're reuniting now in the present day for the book, the reason for that breakup is just so out there and completely avoidable. It has to do with a lot of like misunderstandings, and if the character just like opened their mouth and explained themselves, it probably would have worked out differently, but they chose not to. They chose to keep their mouths shut. So this book had that going for it, which lowered it in my rating scale, but also there was just a lot going on. Devney Perry kind of threw everything in this book. There were so many things going on, and I felt like it was unnecessary, and it didn't really fit well together. Like, it did not feel like a cohesive plot. Like, it was just so strange to me. So I was very frustrated with this book, and I was hoping that it was going to be another Devney Perry that I really loved, and it turned out to not be. So it was only 3 stars for me. I was very frustrated. Next is Even If It Hurts. And I bought this book before I read it because I was so convinced that I was going to love it. Sam Mariano has written some incredibly taboo relationships, Untouchable being one of the ones that I really love. And here she does have another hero who has a little bit of like psychopath qualities. But the main reason that I can give as to why Untouchable worked for me and why Even If It Hurts does not work for me is that Dare just seems like a person who wants everybody to believe that he is in control, and he is the person that is running the show. But there is a character, his current girlfriend, who's not the heroine, who kind of makes him look a little dumb. I think she does. I think the girlfriend makes him look like he's absolutely not in control of the situation. And then we have the heroine, Aubrey. She's so innocent, and she really just takes Dare at his word, even though she knows that he's bad news and he's doing things that make her kind of question, like, am I dumb for putting my trust in him? And in my opinion, yes, it does make her dumb for putting her trust in him. I was expecting more of a relationship like Carter and Zoe, where even though Carter was a psychopath and putting Zoe through hell, I felt like Zoe wasn't going to break, and I also felt like Zoe actually developed feelings for this character, which were real. And Aubrey, I felt like it was from the beginning, she had this like rose-colored glasses about Dare. She always believed the best in him, and he's not a good guy. He's not supposed to be a good guy. And I just felt like she doesn't have the personality to handle a psychopath, and that's how I felt. So Aubrey, I didn't feel like she was on Dare's level. I didn't feel like she could handle him or rein him in or whatever, and their relationship was just very lackluster for me. So yeah. So the next one is The Heir Apparent's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. It's a mouthful. I really loved the first book in this series, and I was very excited because Rejected Mates is not something that I read a ton of in paranormal werewolf shifter romances, and the Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate worked so well for me. I was fascinated by this werewolf pack and their dynamic, and the heroine and her band of women who were single and kind of in this pack that historically was very oppressive, but they found their own way to exert their independence, and then of course one of their own being mated to the alpha of that pack, it was going to change things. So very satisfied with the first book, and I'm kind of really sad that the second book was not in that same pack, because I feel like we were making some progress in that pack, and I really like that. I really wanted the next book to be about one of the other girls who was friends with the heroine from book 1. But in book 2, we go to a completely separate pack. And it just did not have like the same charming quality as the first book. I just had a lot of trouble really connecting to the hero and the heroine. And it just, to me, wasn't as interesting of rejected mates type of situation for me. It just was a little bit of a disappointment. So I gave that one 3 stars. Next one is Mercy by Sarah Kate. I've loved the Salacious Players series. This has lots of interesting kink in each book. Some of them are hits, some of them are misses, and Mercy just so happens to be a miss, and it's completely based on personal preference. I was really excited that we were going to get another age gap romance, and this time it was going to be an older woman, younger man age gap romance, but I was pretty much disappointed in Beau's character. So Beau is the son of Emerson. Emerson is the hero for book 1, Praise. I felt like Beau was pretty unlikable in book 1. He was selfish. He's the ex-boyfriend of the heroine from book 1, and he cheated on her. But I did feel like we got some good growth from Beau in book 1. By the end of the book, like I felt like he was on the path to where he was going to mature. And then we get to Mercy, and he's still on that path to a certain extent, but I feel like the author, Sarah Kate, kind of regresses him a little bit because of the dynamic between the hero and the heroine. So this book focuses on the dom-sub relationship between the hero and the heroine being the dominant sexual partner and the hero being the submissive. And in this particular dynamic, dom-sub dynamic, he is bratty. So he likes to do things on purpose, things that he was explicitly told not to do or he would be punished. He likes to do that on purpose so that he will get punished. And I historically don't like bratty characters. So I was kind of a little bit disappointed that Beau ended up by being a bratty character. It's just something that I don't personally enjoy reading about. So yeah, I had high hopes for this relationship. It didn't play out like I thought it would, so it was a little bit disappointing for me. The next one is Hidden Waters by Catherine Cowles. I really did enjoy the first book in the series, Tattered Stars. I was very invested in the characters from the beginning. This plot where the hero moves back to this small town where her family has basically become pariahs because her father had kidnapped this local girl. She was saved. And there's a romance that develops between her and the older brother of the same girl who was kidnapped. And so it was kind of like a little bit forbidden romance, and I enjoyed it. It was fun times. And this book is the 3rd book in the series. I really didn't enjoy the second book as much as I did the first one either, but in this case, the heroine had a little bit more build up for me. Addie is the cousin of the heroine from the first book. We know that she's been through a tough time. We know that she grew up in a horrible environment where she was abused by her father because their family dynamic is that the men control everything, that the women are submissive to the men completely. And man, was I really disappointed in every single one of these books. They all ended with a kidnapping at the end. And I was just like, okay, so we had a kidnapping in book 1, and that was fun for me. That was exciting for me. Then we had a kidnapping in book 2, and I was like, it's the same thing that happened in book 1. Okay, well, it wasn't as exciting now because we've already done that. And then book 3, it happened again, and I was like, what? Why? I was like, Is that all we're doing in this series? I swear. I'm still gonna read the last book in this series because it's about the younger sister who was kidnapped in the beginning, and I just want to see her have her HEA like really bad. But like, if that book also ends with a kidnapping at the end, Catherine Cowles, there's nothing else that you can do at the end for a conflict other than the heroine gets kidnapped. Like, it's just too much. It's just too much repetition. So I was very disappointed with that because I thought that I was discovering a new author that was going to be, you know, a favorite small town romance author, and it didn't turn out that way. I still think that Tattered Stars for me was worth the read. The other 2 books that I've read in the series were not. But I was more disappointed at the end of book 3 than I was at the end of book 2, just because I was like, damn, she really repeated it again. And lastly on my list, I put Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. So this year, it was the first time that I ever picked up the series. I only recently started reading Sarah J Maas. I was not a person who read her as she was growing in popularity, and I enjoyed her other series, and this series, going back to like her first series, was interesting because it's definitely not the same writing style at all as what I'm used to when I pick up a newer book of hers. And I was very hesitant to pick up another book after reading Throne of Glass because the characters read so immature to me. So that was disappointing, but it was also a case of when you read current books by an author and their writing style has evolved and it has grown and it has become so much better because they have that experience under their belt. It's so hard sometimes going to their first books because they don't have that writing experience yet. They haven't really found their groove. And so I try not to judge a person when I'm like, okay, I know I'm reading the first book that they've ever published, but I was very disappointed with that first book. I was just like, I don't know if I want to read this series. Now, they get better. I did enjoy a lot of books in the series. Once I got past the first like 2 or 3 books, then they started getting interesting because she got her feet wet and she started doing some interesting things that didn't feel so cliche. But yeah, Throne of Glass, I was like, okay. I was warned not to get high expectations, but it was just still a little bit jarring for me. So yeah, anyway, those were my most disappointing reads that I had in 2022. Again, I had more DNFs and like 1 stars, like I didn't mention Haunting Adeline, which I also DNF'd. Some Tilly Coles, which I just know that Tilly Cole is just not an author for me and I won't be picking up anymore. Tilly Coles, I've had enough with experimenting with that author. But yeah, it would have been a very long video if I mentioned every single book. And honestly, some of them were so unmemorable. Like I can't even tell you what their characters' names are or really what happened. I just see my rating and it was low and I'm like, yeah, I don't really remember that experience that much. So it's a forgettable book. Anyway, what were your most disappointing reads for the year? I would love to know if you had some similar ones to me or if you completely disagreed with that, which is completely fine because it's only natural that people are going to have different opinions on books and you're not going to offend me if you disliked a book that I really loved or you really loved a book that I disliked. So no arguments here, no hurt feelings here. That's just the name of the game. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.